Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. We'll be talking about the spate of terrorism that we've seen particularly in the last year, 2024, Pakistan's response to it. Of course, at this time, we must acknowledge the terrorist attack on January 31st, February 1st that we saw in Manjukar and Harnai, which killed about 23 people were martyred. Of course, we want to take a moment to, talk about those that were martyred in this attack, to pay homage to them, and also, of course, the security forces and their efforts at this time to ensure that Pakistan remains safe, and to constantly work as our army, our defense forces, to ensure that the citizens of Pakistan, you and I, remain safe even as we talk today. We'll be talking about overall the efforts underway at this time to control terrorism, the way that Pakistan and its forces have rallied to ensure that it remains safe and a terrorist-free region. And the efforts that are being made continually as we speak. All of that today on Perspective. I have with me Brigadier Waqar Khan. Thank you for being with us today. We also have with us Brigadier Retired Masood Ahmed Khan. Thank you for joining us today. And Javed Jadoon, who is a senior analyst. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to start with Brigadier Masood here in the studio. Brigadier Sahab, like we were earlier saying, of course, this is also a huge attack that happened less than a day ago. How do you look at this time, our response to terrorism? And then we later also talk about the causes that we've seen, particularly in the last year, that ended, just about a month ago.
As far as we will start with the causes, as far as the causes are concerned, that is return of Afghan Taliban, and that is then it was the Afghan return, their return, which led to terrorist attack inside Pakistan. Basically, they facilitated their release of the terrorists from the prisons and facilitated them, sheltered them, given them weapons left by the Americans and financial, logistic, everything, and they were facilitated attack across Pakistan. That is one thing, and Afghan Taliban, they are using them as a leverage against Pakistan. That is one thing. The Pakistani government and they have taken all possible steps to talk on the issue with the Afghan Taliban, but unfortunately they are so ungrateful. They are not paying any heed to our requests and the facilitation made by the regional countries. That is very unfortunate.
I want to start with this. I think what you've mentioned is extremely important when you say that they're so ungrateful and the fact that they don't acknowledge the kind of efforts that the regional countries are making. I'm going to include other guests in this also. Brigadier Sahab, can you hear me? Brigadier Waqar, can you hear me? Can you please unmute? Ji. Can you hear me now? Brigadier Sahab, can you hear me now? Javed Sahab, let's talk about Brigadier Masood Sahab here mentioned that the Afghan Taliban we've seen have proven to be extremely ungrateful, and they don't seem to understand the efforts the regional countries have made with regard to, of course, the challenges that the Afghan people make. And we as a country, of course, have done whatever we have because of those women, children and civilians in Afghanistan. Do you think vis-a-vis Afghanistan at this time, our policy with regard to Afghanistan at this time, of course, the government has made sure, that we have a no tolerance policy with regard to it. Do you think it's understood by the Afghan government at this time sufficiently?
Thank you very much, Mahrukh. I think it is an extremely important question, whether Taliban have understood what Pakistan wants. I think Taliban should know that it was Pakistan which supported them throughout in their 20 years long struggle against the NATO troops. It was Pakistan which provided them a cushion in Pakistan. 4 million Afghan refugees got settled in our country. And despite the fact that we had meager resources and the global community stopped, extended the support to the refugees in Pakistan, Pakistan did everything which Pakistan could have done. And particularly when Ashraf Ghani government was gone, it was our hope that once Taliban come into power in Afghanistan, Pakistan's western borders would be secure, and the curse of terrorism, we would be able to control it or stem it completely. But unfortunately, with the passage of time, we witnessed that Afghan Taliban provided safe havens to terrorists on their own territory, despite the fact that during the Doha negotiations process, they committed with the United States of America that, of course, it was the terminology was used that the soil, Afghan soil, would not be used against United States and its allies. But of course, Pakistan is a brotherly country. Pakistan shares 2,500 long kilometer border with Afghanistan, and there are divided tribes which settled down. Which have settled down across the border on two sides. I think it is very unfortunate, Mahrukh, that Taliban continue to provide safe havens, and the kind of losses we have suffered is only because the terrorists who come from Afghanistan, they carry out terrorist attacks inside Pakistani territory along the border areas where our security forces put up a brave fight, and then they go back once again into their own safe havens. Until and unless those safe havens are not dismantled, Pakistan will not be able to completely stem this fresh wave of terrorism or spike in terrorism. And we also carried out...
On that note, let me go to Brigadier Waqar. Brigadier Sahab, as far as those safe havens are concerned, let's continue from where Brigadier Masood also mentioned, and then Javed Sahab also. As far as those safe havens are concerned, how far away are we? You know, how as far as inroads are concerned, where are we with regard to that in terms of our situation and our defense forces?
I think now it's time for being apologetic or defensive about Taliban or supporting them is over. It's very clear that, in past 3 years, it was a total betrayal despite whatever favors Pakistan did. And I think if you look at the multidimensional approach adopted by the government of Pakistan, the state of Pakistan, it has started working because I would say this is the last phase of the war, and 2025 is going to be decisive in Pakistan and in KP. Meanwhile, the way Pakistan has been able to rally the region, like in Moscow format, you had Russia, you had Iran, Central Asian Republics, Pakistan, China, all putting pressure. And there's also news now, there's a new team going, at least from Pakistan, China and Russia, to, I think, give a final warning to Taliban, because it's not only Pakistan is affected, although we are the worst affected. Definitely Iran is affected. Then you have attacks by IS in Russia taking place. Then you have threat to Chinese Xinjiang province. And even Tajikistan is worried because now there are...
But like Brigadier Masood said, as far as these regional countries are concerned, do you think that, the Afghan government is closer to acknowledging the efforts of these regional countries, including Pakistan, of course, primarily Pakistan, but like you said, there are other countries also, for the people and for the civilians of Afghanistan? That is the question, right?
Yeah, I think there is a difference, because if you look at before Trump, President Biden's presidency, I think there was a Hippocratic policy adopted by the West, and especially US. And now the reports are very clear. More than 17 billion to $20 billion in last 3.5 years given to Taliban in different, let's say, domains, but mostly it landed up with Taliban. $7 billion of arsenal or munitions and weapons which were there. So all told, this is like equipping them for next 2 decades. And now I think Trump says he's going to count every dollar. And now there are actually some attacks that took place in the new year which are linked to IS.
Let me come back to you. Masood Sahab, when we say that perhaps it is the policies of the Biden administration, and now, of course, there is a stark change if we look at what Trump is saying, and his policies and the fact America first, all of those things. Do you think that change is now acknowledged by the Afghan government and also realized by them with regard to the people? Because for us, as far as Pakistan is concerned, it's not really the government, it's the civilians for which we've made concessions in the past, as you've also said. But as far as the change in the US is concerned, do you think it's going to have an effect?
Probably this is a dramatic change as far as the new administration is concerned. The stand which has taken by the Trump administration, especially Trump, before even taking oath, he said that we have given Afghan Taliban billions of dollars, and they have taken our weapons as well. So he said, no, the aid is linked with the return of our weapons. That is one thing. Second, he has also suspended the Afghan refugee plan, which was endorsed by the previous Biden administration. And thirdly, the Secretary of State, Mark Rubio, he has said that they are going to place a higher bounty on the heads of the Afghan Taliban leaders. And because now they say, and more recently, the Tulsi Gabbard, the new Director National Intelligence, before she was appearing before the Senate Hearing Committee for her confirmation as a Director DNI, she said she has a serious concern of the ISK and Al-Qaeda inside Afghanistan. So now they are acknowledging the threat which is emerging from Afghanistan is real. It's not only the Pakistan specific, it is threat is for the region, and they're also thinking of this, that the TTP has with the alliance with Al-Qaeda has become an international threat. So that is the approach the Americans are thinking. As far as the funds are concerned, Americans in the last 20 years, when Ashraf Ghani and Karzai were in power, they spent $143 billion. And subsequently, when Afghan Taliban took over, they have spent $18 billion. So that means in 3 years, $6 billion annually and $160 million on daily basis. So that was the support. That means that the dollars were pouring inside Afghanistan. So the support of American administration, the Biden administration was there. That was very unfortunately. And accordingly, this money was also subsequently given to terror outfits. And according to SIGA, they said that there is a discrepancy of one figure was $293 million, whereabouts were not known. So that was unfortunate, but this administration, I think they have taken right decisions.
So you think they're going to make efforts very speedily to right this wrong?
Yeah, exactly. They have realized the threat.
So let me go to Brigadier Waqar on this. Brigadier sir, if it's true, and indeed it seems to be, that the Americans now under Donald Trump acknowledge the mistakes that were made under the Biden administration, do you think that when they acknowledge this and the fact that they with Pakistan, the kind of help that we will perhaps we would need in terms of funds to deal with this terrorism, do you think that America would be willing to perhaps extend that to Pakistan? Do you think the kind of cooperation that would surely help? Because we are of course a third world country, we have our own challenges, and the region and its cause of terrorism, the concern of terrorism in this region is a concern that the Americans know.
I think as far as trans policy is concerned, it still has to crystallize. But by and large, you see in his executive order, it means that he is going to push for it. And he's quite clear on that. He's also talking of, maintaining some bases in Afghanistan. So this is, I think, quite a murky, I would say, undertaking that on one side you want to stop the aid, on the other side they want to have presence in Afghanistan because he feels that probably that's how they can keep an eye on American interests in the region. So in case there is a military option that Trump is considering, then it means that probably it could be maybe either with the understanding of Taliban, which is highly likely because they can't afford telling the world that this is a power they pushed out and now they are basically in cohort with the US. So let's see how it crystallizes. But as far as I think the aid topic for any kind of humanitarian or let's say UN support operation in Afghanistan is going to actually have two effects. One is going to definitely start drying the Taliban's resources, especially the foreign exchange, because they have to run the state also. So it means there will be internal pressure also building up. The other is that maybe start affecting the Afghan people who are already suffering. Reports are 75% are now facing shortage of food. And then there is also, the new National Resistance Front under Momin Masood is, I think, quite active. And they are also tackling the Taliban. So it means that in case US can pressurize and also cut off their financial resources, there are chances that there will be one pressure from the population when they start suffering. Whether is that resistance front can get stronger. Pakistan is already, I think, at least coordinated with Tajikistan for fight against terrorism. So maybe if this delegation, which is going from Russia, Pakistan, and China, are able to convince that in case they want to live like a normal state, and all the regional countries are for it, that whosoever is in Kabul, they should be basically supporting it, provided it doesn't become a base for terrorism against neighboring countries. And Pakistan has been, I think, suffering the most because of various reasons. Refugees, then open borders, I would say porous border despite the fencing and all that, and then of course humanitarian, angle factor, because you have to allow people to come and go. 300,000 Afghans still cross every month, to and fro from Pakistan to Afghanistan, Afghanistan to Pakistan. So these are some of the factors. Then, of course, is the issue of capacity building, seriousness of the provincial governments in KP and Balochistan, the ownership of course, these operations and support, and then capacity building for the law enforcement on the civil side with the police. Like this incident, near north of basically Kalat, basically between Kuzar and Quetta, although it's very closer to, let's say, the one border. But mainly it was a civil area, and in case civil police was effective, things would have been right. Then the FC had to come into clear because they had captured the D file. They were trying to basically stop the traffic, and so the big operation had to be launched. So it means that the first line of defense, which is basically the police and levies, have to be strengthened. Same is true in, I think, KP. Capacity building is needed. And then there's a political will required. They should not be dilly-dallying like in KP. At times they start, dilly-dallying on when we are dealing with the TTP or Taliban. They generally,
Javed Sab on this. Javed Sab, as far as political will is concerned, KP has been, like Brigadier Masood is saying, it's Brigadier Waqar is saying, it's a little, one has to say, challenging as far as KP is concerned. How do you look at the situation there?
Mahrukh, let me first respond to any expectations from President Trump. I think let's not make a mistake that President Trump will return back to Afghanistan, because they left the mess behind. It was a hasty and disorderly retrieve. They left behind more than $7 billion worth of weapons, and they abandoned this entire region. And I don't believe, because as far as President Trump is concerned, he has so many priorities on his table, and Afghanistan is least among those priorities. His priorities are immigration and stopping the war in Ukraine, not starting another war in Afghanistan. What we have to do is we have to evolve our own homegrown and indigenous policies as far as countering this terrorism is concerned. And we all know and very clearly know that the terrorism emanates from Afghanistan, from nowhere else. Of course, it is supported by hostile intelligence agencies. RAW is there. And another important dimension has been added, the warming up of relations between Kabul and New Delhi. And it should be a cause of concern for Pakistan, because under Ashraf Ghani's regime, Afghanistan's soil was dotted with so many Indian consulate facilities which were spawning terrorism in Pakistan. And once again, Taliban are warming up to New Delhi, and that should be one of the causes of concern for Islamabad as well. As far as the government of KP is concerned, of course, I think it is the primary responsibility of the provincial government, because the province shares borders with Afghanistan. There are divided tribes, people living on the both sides of the border. I mean, it is unbelievable that one can ignore this very important fact that the people of KP, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, they have suffered the most as far as the ongoing war against terrorism is concerned. So I think what provincial government has not been able to do is to modernize the civilian law enforcement agencies. They have not been able to provide them counter-terrorism training. They have not been able to provide them state-of-the-art weapon systems, because this ongoing fight against terrorism has to be won. There's no other option. I think there's absolutely no other option except winning the war against terrorism. And if the entire nation is not united, if the province of KP, Balochistan, and the federal government, and let me add one more important thing that we have been talking about.
Ji.
a central organization which could coordinate efforts among the provinces and the federal government and sharing of intelligence between the federal intelligence agencies and the provincial setups as well. We have to
We
have
talk about coordination, and again you've mentioned this political will and coordination. We've also recently seen a kind of solo flight by the provincial government in KP saying that, you know, about talks. I'm sure we've all heard it, and then later on, more recently, it's been echoed again that perhaps we can resolve issues with talks. Isn't this a direct, a contradiction in what seems to be one policy vis-a-vis Afghanistan and another?
Mahrukh, I think talks is no more an option as far as defeating terrorism is concerned. We have tried the option of talks with the Taliban in Afghanistan, who are in power in Kabul, and they refuse to budge in, they refuse to cooperate, they refuse to abandon their brothers in arms, that is the Tehreek-e-Taliban in Pakistan, and that terrorist organization has been given refuge inside Afghanistan. Everybody knows, not a secret, that they have got their safe havens and sanctuaries over there. They are being provided every facility. They are being supported, funded, and abetted as well. So absolutely, there's no doubt that unless and until Kabul does realize that they are doing it at the cost of relations with Islamabad, because in the longer run, Afghanistan is definitely in turmoil right now. The foreign assistance and aid has been stopped. They have got a population to feed. WFP says that millions of people are going hungry in
Masood, I'll come back to you. Brigadier Sahab, one of, you know, if it is a fact, if the non-cooperation that we are looking at from the Afghan side is a fact, isn't it important for us to explore other options? Because of course we do have continuous operations going on against what's happening as far as terrorism is concerned from there, but isn't it time to devise new strategies and new ways of dealing with that kind of non-cooperation?
So we have basically exhausted all the options.
Okay.
So we have been in contact with Afghan Taliban and the regional countries through the forums of United Nations and other forums we have been used. But unfortunately, the Afghan Taliban, they are unwilling, that is very clear, and they have shown their inability to act against this fitna al-Kharij operating from Afghanistan. But recently, the recent development which we have seen, that the three envoys of Pakistan, China and Russia, they are likely to visit Kabul maybe in next couple of weeks or in a week's time. So they are going to present evidence and they will pressurize the Afghan government to ensure that their territory is not used for the attacks across the borders, whether it is in Pakistan or elsewhere. So that is one thing very important. Secondly, United Nations has realized the importance of the presence of terrorist organizations inside Afghanistan. A couple of weeks back, the United Nations Security Council endorsed the continuity of United Nations analytical support and sanction monitoring teams, tenure which was expired. So they have been asked to continue for another year and a half. So they are basically monitoring the situation inside Afghanistan.
Brigadier Sahib, as we talk about the UN, certainly what you're saying, and they're monitoring, of course that's important, but what about if we have exhausted all options like you're saying? Isn't it true that the Afghan government and the Afghans are very much dependent on their transit trade which comes through Pakistan?
Exactly.
So why don't we explore those options and why don't we go towards that?
Yeah, that is a very important thing, and that is, I think one thing is that we should still, we are open as far as diplomatic talks are concerned with Afghan Taliban, that is one thing. Second, we have a number of leverage which we can use. As you said, the Afghan transit trade, it is the lifeline for Afghanistan is concerned. The trade, all the convoys, the trade routes, they passes through Pakistan.
But is it because of the people? Is it because of the civilians that we are, shy of?
So that is one of the consideration. Pakistan has this capability. This is the strategic leverage with us to basically shape the trajectory of Afghan economy. So we can control. So we can create a situation, even we can stop that assistance which goes through Pakistan. So we have that capability. At the same time, we have another leverage, diplomacy and politically, we have been supporting Afghanistan across international forums. So we can stop that. At the same time, the military options. So we have demonstrated we have the capability. That doesn't mean we have inability to operate inside Afghanistan physically. But we have demonstrated the capability by striking inside Afghanistan. So that leverage is with us. We can still go and strike targets inside Afghanistan. As things now confirm this, what has happened in the last couple of days. If we get the evidence, Pakistan is going to strike inside Afghanistan. That is without any doubt. In addition, we have intelligence. That is another leverage. Pakistan has one of the best intelligence agencies. So we know the dynamics inside Afghanistan, who's who and what is happening inside Afghanistan. So the Afghans and then Afghan refugees. So we are basically hosting 2.9 million Afghans documented inside Pakistan. Those are in position of proof of registration cards, and those are in position of Afghan citizen card. If we send them back to Afghanistan, so imagine what is going to happen inside Afghanistan. So Pakistan has number of these leverages, but unfortunately the Afghan Taliban, they are using this fitna of Kharij as a leverage against Pakistan to pressurize Pakistan. And recently there was a important news. There was an agreement signed between the Afghan Taliban and the Fitna al-Kharij, TTP, Gul Bahadur Group, and Maulvi Sadiq Noor of North Waziristan. There was another alliance of North Waziristan. This was signed, agreement was signed before the Taliban taking over Afghanistan. So in that, the assurance was given by the Afghan Taliban to these Fitna al-Kharij, when they will return to power, they will support them in bringing the so-called Sharia in Pakistan, and they will facilitate their control of exile Fatah. This is known as Mirali Accord. So things are, the Afghan Taliban, they are actively supporting this Fitna al-Kharij against Pakistan. There is beyond any doubt. So we have evidence, we have presented those years number of times to Afghan Taliban as well as to the international community. So now it is up to them to take the decision in the best interest of Afghanistan.
Brigadier Masood highlighted some of the efforts, of course, that Pakistan is making as in terms of talks, in terms of operations, in terms of strategy. Do you think we need to look at other options? Do you think we need to look at other solutions at this time? Because, you know, the kind of results, of course, that we want perhaps are not being, we don't see them happening.
I think there has been a multi-dimensional effort, and that must continue. I just give you an example of like Turkey dealt with Iraq and Syria. They had the threat from PKK, and this again emanated from these two countries. So initially, of course, there were cross-border attacks, and then they basically actually came and captured two belts, especially in Syria, in Afrin and the other sectors, which again became the base for STS operation later on. So this is also, despite that this was a Syrian area, and same is true in Iraq, a couple of enclaves. But they felt that terrorism could only be stopped by these actions. So this is, I think, maximalist approach. So when you're looking at military options, like there was discussion on Waqar, despite the Foreign Office has given the clarification. But these are some of the, I would say, pain points that Pakistan and regional countries can, exercise when, I would say, when all the other options have been exhausted. There is definitely a diplomatic effort, as I think mentioned here in the discussion, and they are important countries, China, Pakistan, Russia, and they are also, I would say, not only neighbors, but also, they would like to have a stable Afghanistan, provided that it's not used as a base of terrorism, and there's a concern. And then, of course, economic measures like Afghan transit trade. Then, of course, there's a lot of 25% of the grain supply in Afghanistan goes from Pakistan. But then it comes to, basically those 40 million Afghans who are already suffering. And even in COVID, you remember, Pakistan had to open their doors and because there was a lack of expertise in health. So probably that's where I think Pakistan's hands become tight. But as far as I think Taliban or their support to Kharij is concerned, I think military options are there. Within, I think, Pakistan's borders, we have to fight it out almost on daily basis till it is defeated. And then, of course, there are certain options across the border. Definitely, you have to look at the collateral damage also, and then, of course, diplomatic and economic measures and strengthening, your own system, especially the governance system in both the provinces, and also giving relief to people because people who join these cadres are basically disenfranchised. There's no other motivation. I don't know what is the final aim of, let's say, Khawarij or TTP and the some nationalist group, and what are they going to do, basically, by terrorism? So I think it's just a lost cause for them, but it's a long fight ahead. And I think all these three multidimensional approaches could finally
Lost
take.
cause, Brigadier Saab is saying, and of course it is for the people of Afghanistan, because really, whether it's the terrorist elements, there is, Brigadier Masood talked about how, the kind of money that the Americans say that they've spent, in Afghanistan. We know the state of the people of Afghanistan, we know the kind of poverty there is, the kind of, overall, of course, we've seen the winter also, and the situation there at this time. So, of course, the eventual losers in this are the people of Afghanistan, but unfortunately Pakistan at this time is responsible for its own people. As the state of Pakistan is responsible for its own borders, it has responsibility to ensure peace for its people, and our people are dying at this time. What do you think is the solution to this for the people of Afghanistan? Let's talk about that.
Are you asking me, Mahrukh?
Javed Saab.
Okay. Mahrukh, first let me respond to what you asked, that what are the options available to Pakistan. I strongly believe, Mahrukh, that the diplomatic option is the most viable option for Pakistan, because the kind of relations we had with Afghanistan and the past history of bilateral relations between the two countries, diplomacy is the only way forward. Look what the Chinese have done. Their footprints are very strong in Afghanistan. Russians are sending their senior level delegations to Kabul. They are negotiating with the Taliban government, and both countries believe that engagement is better than the threat of use of force. So does Pakistan, because Pakistan doesn't want to use force against Afghanistan, and Pakistan does want a peaceful country which is at peace with itself, and then Pakistan can conclude that we would be safe as well. And Iranians are doing the same. And in my opinion, the second option could be that we can engage these regional countries who are already engaging with the Taliban. For example, the Chinese and the Russians and the Iranians and even the Central Asian republics. We can have a holistic strategy. We can put, once all these countries, they sit together, evolve a strategy, then they can put pressure on Afghanistan, on Taliban leadership as well, and that pressure would be, I think, extremely important.
Isn't it true that our relationship with Afghanistan has been problematic? One has to acknowledge from the start. A country that doesn't fully acknowledge our, sovereignty even now. One has to agree is it's going to be problematic having diplomatic, trying to deal with this in a diplomatic manner, or having the kind of diplomacy that can be successful.
Mahrukh, as I may disagree with Hamid Karzai on so many things. Once he said that Pakistan and Afghanistan are inseparable twins, and I strongly believe that is the case, because it is Afghanistan and Pakistan, as I said, divided tribes, brotherly relations, two Muslim countries. I think the use of force or the threat of use of force should be the last option. Diplomacy should always be the first option, and we mustn't shut the doors of diplomacy. And diplomacy does work at the end of the day, Mahrukh, because every war, every conflict, and every difference of opinion has been resolved through negotiations. I think more diplomacy would pave the way. We can soften them up, we can tell them, we can convince them, and of course there are senior elements in Afghanistan as well. Not the entire Taliban leadership is insane. Maybe there are some hawkish people, and maybe...
Right, we'll be taking a short break on that note, after which we'll be right back. Please stay with us. Welcome back. We've been talking about the spate of terrorism we've seen in the last year and the efforts that have always continued as far as Pakistan and state is concerned. We've also seen the COS visit today in Balochistan, where he visited those that were martyred in the recent attacks. Brigadier Sahab, as far as this resolve is concerned, again, we're talking about our resolve, we're talking about talks, we're talking about diplomatic efforts. You said that, if it doesn't work, then Pakistan will look at the other more aggressive option, right?
Certainly, this is an article of United Nations, Article 51, Chapter 7 of United Nations, which authorizes a country to can respond to any action militarily taken from another country. So Pakistan reserves their right. Beside diplomacy is the first choice, and subsequently we will continue with the kinetic action. That is very important. So that is factor. Despite the fact in the past we have been several times to the delegation visited Afghanistan, and they have been given evidence. Those years of the TTP involvement in Pakistan, they understand the TTP is an issue, but they are reluctant to act against them. And there, one of the fear among the Afghan Taliban is that they may, if they crack down on them, they may join Daesh. Okay. So that is one factor. And second, otherwise is there was another report when the Khariji commander, the leader of the so-called this TTP, he was told to control his movement in Afghanistan. So he said the sun cannot be hidden with two fingers. So that is the approach they are having in Afghanistan now. So they have become a threat to Afghanistan itself.
But
now,
if that is true, do you think that there's a possibility of combined action that we can take with them as far as Taliban are concerned?
because they haven't shown any willingness as far as action is concerned. So because the international community is saying, United Nations is saying that even if it is written in Doha Accord in February 2020, and it was written that Afghanistan soil will not be used against the United States, its allies and other countries. So despite all that they are using, so now it is up to international community. If they impose sanction, then the plight of the Afghan people is an issue. So that's why probably things will go in the right direction. The pressure is building on the Afghan Taliban to understand that
they have no other option but to come down on this. Brigadier Waqar, your quick comments. Do you think that they are now understanding and possibility of a combined action?
I have my doubts because so far it has been basically a tool of policy that they are using. But I think there are fractures in Afghan leadership. So if you look at the Haqqani versus the Kandhari especially, and then of course there is pressure building up from inside. So maybe I think in the long run, but not in the short run, because so far they've tried to use it as a tool of policy to draw concession, let the this illegal spectrum continue. And basically, this is how the economy survives as the regime is concerned. So I don't foresee, anything like that in near future, but definitely maybe in the long run.
Javed Sahab, your comments also. You think that there is hope in the near future of the Afghan Talibans and the Taliban government realizing that they have no option but to put a stop to this.
Mahrukh, let us understand that Kabul government is not recognized by the global community. It is a de facto regime. Sanctions don't work because no country has any bilateral economic trade or investment ties with them. So you really can't put pressure on them. So I would again re-emphasize that diplomacy should be intensified bilaterally and with a regional approach, and that will definitely work, because engaging with Taliban will ultimately convince them that this is not in their best interest, because they would be seeking international recognition as well. And until and unless they abandon such policies, they will not be getting the international recognition in the foreseeable future.
Thank you so much for being with us today, Brigadier Masood Ahmed Khan. Thank you for joining us. Brigadier Waqar, thank you for being with us. Javed Jadoon, thank you for joining us today. Of course, Pakistan has consistently maintained a no-tolerance policy with regard to terrorism that comes from, for example, Afghanistan. Of course, at the same time, the main concern that we've had is for those Afghan people that continue to suffer, the women and children, at the hands of the Afghan government, whether we look at the Taliban, And we hope that the Talib and the Afghan government will realize, and it seems that they might be realizing this as far as those Afghans are, that they're as much a threat to them and the well-being of their country as they are to for example, Pakistan. We hope the diplomatic efforts will pay off and there will be a realization that there is no other way but to put a stop to this. Thank you so much for joining us today on Perspective.